The Gizeh/Bafath Intelligences, Part 1 guest article by Berk Gümüs. 768th contact Monday, 15th March 2021, 10:36 p.m.
Oh, see here, I received it from a Mrs. though she does not want her name to be mentioned publicly. She also does not want it mentioned where she lives and so on, and what is also to be said, the woman told me she is now 79 years old, that she was terribly ashamed of her parents precisely because they belonged to this sect and took part in everything against me. But read now, please.
Translation of the letter.
Dear Fritz, what I write to you must remain between us, and therefore you must preferably burn this letter after you have read it. Together with Alois, I have news for our group, but it must always remain secret and serve our cause, and really must remain secret for all time, just as it must never become public that I have something to do with the whole affair. Also, no one in the office must learn anything about the fact that I only go to church for the sake of appearances, because in this way I prevent myself belonging to all of you. For we have also those in the office who help this dirty ruffian, because they are well-minded towards him, which is not understandable. Therefore, we must also encourage Hans to at the school point out to the pupils, and these then to the others, that they should not call this mean scoundrel Alois, but as has already been done for a long time, simply as little Feitmere and filthy mere, so that he already now and also in his further life does not have any rest. But what I want to tell you is that we interrogated Meyerhofer, who is always seen together with this dirty guy, and he said that this dirty dog Meyer would be the new prophet, and furthermore that the New Testament would be a book of lies. This, however, must not be spread by this guy in our little town, and must also not be taken out into the world. For this reason, we in the office, and also through the help of our brother in faith, the vicar, but also of our brothers and sisters in faith living in various other countries, and through our connections, have undertaken and been able to achieve everything to ensure that for all time this scrabbler, should he really ever accomplish to go abroad, then he will be decried in every country by the embassies, and will also be dealt with as a dirty ruffian, because it is unacceptable that he denies our Saviour and God, which is however not good and meanly defamatory, for which he must be punished. And for this our dear Saviour will surely stand by us and help us. And how we were able to do that, and for it to actually work, if the scoundrel will be able to do what he says, then our plan must be able to be carried out until far into the future, and it must also work out. That is what Alois and I want to tell you next Sunday evening at 8 o'clock, at a meeting, when we meet at your place in the wage, for which you should then close the restaurant, because we have to be among ourselves and no one will hear anything.
This is outrageous. This corresponds to an unparalleled character and moral depravity. I have no other way of expressing my outrage at this vicious and vile piece of whipping.
You see, this is just one small example of how I was dealt with. But for that I thought I would submit it to you, and then also put it on the internet with the report of the conversation.
That's in addition to all the things you have clarified.
I think so too, but the question is what the descendants of this person will say when they come across this thing which is legibly signed with the family name. The woman told me that this person had worked for the authorities and that there were indeed descendants living who...
You can still bring the letter in the interview report, though you should make the signature illegible.
We'll do 797th contact Saturday, 26th March 2022, 2:27 p.m.
They will be able to do some things, but probably not much, to tame the energies arising from religious belief, which are collected and concentrated with a special device. These are then amplified with the same device, after which these energies and forces are concentrated and directed towards human beings, and tremendous damage is done to them, which can be related to damage to health, as well as of a variety of other natures. What has affected you more and more since you moved into the center in 1977 is not by chance, just as what happened in your workroom when Gizeh and various other persons were affected by it. What has been bothering you more and more in your work from 2003 onwards due to strange influences and unfortunately continues to do so because the filter cannot put a stop to it, which unfortunately cannot be changed because our directives do not allow us to intervene in things that are not directly related to us Ptaahs and our Federation. However, I will give you more details about that later, maybe tomorrow. The whole thing that is happening is very maliciously directed at you alone, which practically harms you to such an extent that you can only do your work with a great deal of effort and patience, which will continue to be the case, and it causes you great difficulties. Consequently, you can only retrieve and write down the reports of the conversations with great difficulty. However, we will have a lot to talk about this later, but you should keep quiet about it. In the main, it is that through their research, they now know that the whole of the lawlessness against you goes back to your childhood, because a woman hated you because you told her your opinion about religion and faith when you were a boy. However, this woman was a fanatically strict believer and belonged to a fake community to which she complained about you. Consequently, some lengthy consultations took place and then attempts were made to win you as a member of this community. The smaller group somehow came into contact with beings that were alien and called themselves Umigos, although it is not yet clear how this was possible. These alien beings were originally also fanatical believers in an all-creating higher might, which they called Saladin and worshipped. In the course of time, however, they fell away from this erroneous belief and turned to Christianity and sought like-minded people far and wide, which they also found in your hometown, among others. But how the connection with the woman came about, who became the actual origin of your lifelong embrace, has not yet been clarified. These Umigos were vicious and fanatically hostile to everything that did not correspond to their views and their faith. Therefore they tried to secretly undermine the faith of all human beings, which was different and strange to them. This was done imperceptibly in such a way that with the help of their devices brought from their homeland, they influenced almost all believers with unnameable exceptions of the earthly religions worldwide through their electronic microtechnology, which was still absolutely unknown on Earth at that time, and its possibilities in such a way that they gradually lost control over their own thinking and became largely incapable of thinking for themselves, and also unstable. Furthermore, they influenced the believers in such a way that they fell prey to malice and bloodlust, whereby they created enmities again and again, which led to evil wars, to religious murder, and all imaginable evil. In the course of time, however, it came to pass that the Umigos, through the influences of the Earth humans' faith in Christianity, became doubtful of their higher might, ultimately repugnant and apostate from it, consequently becoming more and more foreign to their faith, which ultimately led them gradually to turn to the earthly religion of Christianity and to acknowledge the God of that creed. Something that also happens today with Earth humans who are lulled by religious platitudes or who very quickly change their faith through coercion or benefit and become believers in another religion. With the Umigos, however, it was a lengthy process that took a long time. But when Christianity began to spread, they finally turned to it and stuck to it. How the Umigos came into contact with the woman and this religious community in your hometown has not yet been investigated by Alois and his followers, to which he also said that this was not really important, because the only thing that was important was what resulted from it, and that was what haunted you throughout your life. The said woman was a strict believer, but as vicious as the Umigos themselves, who say,
Like goes with like, as we say.
That is aptly said, yet I have never heard those words until now. Good, just now I was talking about this woman being a strict believer regarding the Christian faith, yet she was as vicious in her disposition as the Umigos who had set up their headquarters deep under the main pyramid at Gizeh in Egypt.
Something dawns on me, namely the Gizeh, who were then caught and deported by the Ptaahs. Am I right?
Yes, they were a splintered group of a criminal tribe of our Federation that found passage into this universe and likewise to Earth, because they had our through.
Because they must have been secretly following the Ptaahs when they came to Earth to join us. Bermuda, that's about the way it was, isn't it?
Yes, that is how it was, as I have been oriented in that regard. But now hear further what Alois explained. There were, besides the spiteful and wicked woman.
Horat was her name, but I do not know exactly how her name is spelt correctly, just whether this name has an additional or not. I also want to mention that the majority of all believers are probably deeply unbalanced in their character and in such a way that all evil immediately breaks through to the outside, and these human beings quickly become active in the respective form up to and including hatred and killing and so on.
The extras is not important. But what you say regarding the evil deep in the character, that is undeniable. Now, Alois related that there were 11 other persons, men and women, with this numerous faith community who revealed a nature that was strictly devout. But like the woman, they were also evil, but maintained good relations with some of the local government, specifically 2 men named and who had intimate relations with the woman, although all 3 were married. This woman also had an intimate relationship with your teacher, with whom you spent 1 year in year 4. Who often beat you mercilessly in front of all the students and...
I remember that, and furthermore, I once saw him and the woman you are talking about on the so-called volleyballers when they...
That will not have pleased them both, but let me report further. Alois explained that the woman and the other 11 persons hated you and wished you to die, which of course did not come to pass, so it was arranged that very evil was done to you and that you were shouted down. Intrigues were devised and carried out against you with the help of the community officials and the police, with teachers also helping, but they honestly supported you, but they were forced
to howl with the wolves, otherwise they would have been out of a job, like Teacher Lehman. I know, because he told me himself.
Yes, that's how it was, but I do not have to tell you about that, because you know yourself what happened and how you coped with everything. But Alois said that in the whole affair the Gümüs were very much involved, so in their wickedness and Christian fanaticism they did much to harm you how and where they could. They succeeded very well with the help of the influenced members of the local government, but your will to resist was stronger than their intrigues and all the malice that was shown to you. Besides, I must also mention, the Gümüs used 2 of their 5 devices, which they possessed and handed over to the woman to maliciously influence many human beings in your hometown. These devices, powered by electrical energy, produced an electronic microvibration that could be widely broadcast and adjusted to certain human beings. One of the devices was given in 1948 by a man of the 11 group, namely, to an American friend whom he did not know belonged to the dark government of America. Since then, the latter have been using the virtually indestructible device to this day to influence or even kill certain persons according to their will and benefit. The Gümüs brought these devices with them from their homeland, and they are constructed of metal unknown on Earth, which the experts of the dark government have not yet been able to analyze. The devices can be used in many ways. For example, to induce hallucinations in human beings that seem so real that the people concerned fondly believe that what has happened to them is real. This happened, for example, with Gizeh and other persons in your workroom, as Alois explained. They also have many other efficacies, one of which is how they are used to attack your electronic devices and negatively affect your work and damage everything when you work with them. The emanations of the electronic microwaves also work in other ways, such as how you described to me the strange occurrence that happened in the kitchen of the center. But in another way, the second device was used by the group in your hometown to influence various persons in such a way that they did everything that was harmful to you, which ultimately led to you being taken everywhere and harassed. You, however, did not let yourself be influenced and always remained yourself, as you had learned from Bafath to defend yourself against foreign swinging waves of various kinds and to simply neutralize them. This is the reason why you were never affected by malicious swinging waves, and consequently all attacks of any kind against you were ineffective. However, it is different with regard to the electronic devices and other materials that you have to handle for your work, for these naturally react to the negative influences that are directed towards them. Consequently, they no longer work correctly for you when you work with them, while other persons can use the same devices without any problems. How it works in this way is because all the swinging waves are aligned with your personality, but are deflected by your defenses and transferred to the equipment or material you are working with.
Aha, that finally explains to me why suddenly even wrong letters and strokes and so on occur when writing with a biro and so on, which is why for a long time Eva has had to write me everything that has to be handwritten.
That is unquestionably due to these swinging waves. But towards what Alian explained to me is that the transmission of the whole thing expanded more and more to such an extent that later you were under constant control even in other countries, because a whole network was created that constantly controlled you wherever you were. It was not enough, however, because it was taken so far that your life was to be ended, but the persons hired for this purpose did not succeed. Now, Alian further explained that the woman and 8 of those persons died in the following 34 years, but their 9 descendants were so influenced by their parents that they became equally fanatically religious, believing and hostile to you that they obsessively sought to harm you in the most diverse ways. And so it came about that many attempts were made to end your life. Consequently, the attacks in this regard increased, but you only reported them to the police about 3 times. Because there were also third persons who urged you to report them. To my knowledge, it was the first time in Mehrauli in India because the President of India was standing by when you were shot and injured.
Yes, it was Dr. Radhakrishnan and Dr. Sharma, but there were also 2 women there, and that was Mrs. Fisk and Miss Rogers. In Switzerland it was in Hinwil and before Saarland when I was shot at. In Hinwil it was on the 1st floor where I was printing writings in the presence of Rosa Gottsche, who insisted that I report this incident of being shot through the window to the police. But since the police were not present, I reported the incident to the governor, who issued me with the weapon-carrying license each time, but the matter simply passed without anything being done, just like the shot in Saarland, into the windscreen of the car, which would have hit me if it had not ricocheted. The car was driven by Silvano at the time, and he also insisted that the incident be reported to the police, which is why we immediately drove to Ptaah and went to the police, showed the windscreen, and explained everything. But we were only fobbed off ridiculously and sent away again. Not even a photo was taken of the windshield, which clearly showed what had happened. And the fact that we had even seen the shooter with the small caliber rifle was dismissed with the argument that we had been dreaming, and so on. But one person, the one who almost hit me in Hinwil, came to the center one day and apologized, saying that unfortunately he had been misled by the sect but had now freed himself from it and realized that a belief in a god and so on was nothing more than lying and so on in order to maintain a money-making dependency.
This is known to me, as also our Ptaah folks know. All for your life story has been broadcast several times planet-wide for information. However, as to the attempts to deprive you of life, I will say that by a providence all the attempts proved to be futile again and again, which is why the descendants then sought another way to harm you otherwise. When the last 3 of the first adversaries died of old age, and then also 2 of the descendants, so that today there are only 7 persons left, 2 of whom, however, are struggling with death because they are afflicted with the corona plague. The 3 of them, who have extraordinarily good knowledge and abilities concerning electronics, took out again the futuristic device that had been stored for a long time for them, which at that time the woman had received from the Omegas and with which various persons had been influenced, and made it functional in order to harm you. The Umigers could no longer be asked because they were deported, and so the descendants worked so persistently on the futuristic device until it became functional again and they found out how they could use it. Since then it has been used to do you such harm that you should get into trouble with the human beings, and in such a way that it is very difficult for you to prove that the incidents that occur are not of your making. This already started when you returned to Switzerland in 1969, and since then there have been repeated attempts to deprive you of your life, which even tried to do. It has happened 24 times so far, but every single attempt on your life failed as a result of inexplicable providence.
I guess that was the lucky thing, as we say, or the lucky nothing happened thing. What you said but mentioned about I know because it happened in the kitchen with a knife that was supposed to hit me in the back but was seen at the last moment by who was just able to snatch the knife from as she struck. She only told me years later what had happened at the time because I really had not noticed anything about the whole incident. This and 2 other incidents that were the work of are not counted in the 24 murders. But now I think that's enough palaver. So let's go now, you can talk while flying.
795th contact Tuesday, 8th March 2022, 10:01 p.m.
Unfortunately, since the little ones have been here, new things have been happening and confusing everything. These include the fact that all the interference of the foreign forces is also affecting my health, in addition to the fact that the forces are causing the computer to go haywire and are constantly destroying my work while other persons can work normally on the machine. And that I am not telling fibs and that everything is really as I say. People can prove that also, you and the others, if they stand by and see that I am not doing anything wrong, but nevertheless everything is going wrong and wrong.
But I was on another subject before, which I now want to take up again. What is happening now as an effect of the sectarian machinations with you, and what is happening now with regard to the impairment of your health that has been investigated in the meantime by the Ziltonians who were with you on January 4, 2022. Arlian, the Ziltonian who is leading the whole thing, has now reported to us that they have been able to fathom that the energies and forces that are causing everything in relation to your work, the computer devices, as well as now in relation to the impairment of your health, are the subsequent effect of the lifelong attacks on you. The religious vicious machinations of those people of faith of the former time, when you were not yet resident in the Sintra, but were traveling far and wide in many states on earth, but were nevertheless at the mercy of all the hatred and vengeance of the sectarians, was transferred to their descendants, who were incited against you by their parents and are still trying to get you out of the world, as you once called it. 4 of these descendants, who unfortunately also believe in religious fanaticism, have joined forces and, with the help of others, have been able to work out a development on a technical basis that allows religious energies and their powers to have such an independent effect that they are able to harm a certain person in every way when applied and directed at him or her. Through the efforts of the believers or the sectarians of their efforts have, so to speak, become independent in the form of very strong religious energies and forces, and automatically work against your computer and against you personally through a certain apparatus. However, it is not possible for the Sultanians to counteract this, for they too cannot perform miracles in spite of their high level of evolution. Consequently, they are bound to what is possible for them at present. They too need a great deal of time to fathom the possibilities and to devise and manufacture the corresponding apparatuses which will then be really effective in putting an end to what the religious forces of faith of the sectarian fanatics have brought about, and which now, unfortunately, has such an effect that you and your work are cramped, which has become very troublesome. And as for the time before the Sultanians can really tackle and terminate these religious energies that have been released and their forces, that will take a very long time, and probably longer than your life will last, Arlian said.
So the whole thing is still relevant from my youth, just as it has followed me everywhere. And now it continues in this way because the descendants of the perpetrators of all the evil at that time are also working today to get me hammered. The religious hatred that was brought into the world against me at that time by the Horitans, which has also brought 24 assassination attempts on me so far, will probably only come to an end when I am no longer here, I must say. The fact that now the whole thing is based on technology, I mean the attacks on my writing utensils, which are important for me, and on my health and personality and so on, that probably cannot be changed. Apparently one person or several persons of this sectarian is extraordinarily ingenious and so inventive in the electronic technical field that something so futuristic can be invented, constructed, and put into use. How else could it be that a production was invented by this person or by several persons so that a hell machine could then be built, so to speak, and is now being used against me and my work? I suppose this is something that even the Ziltonians can do nothing about.
That is unfortunately so. Besides, they are not allowed, as we are not, to interfere on Earth in any matters of nature or in matters of human beings and so on.
It really might be more and more difficult for me to still work on the computer. The whole thing of interventions also has an effect elsewhere, namely also when I am over in the kitchen or in the living room and so on. For example, if I want to set a channel on that it does not work, or something else appears on the screen than what I have just set. It is also the same with writing by hand. It often happens that my handwriting is automatically distorted to the point of illegibility, so that I myself can no longer decipher what has actually been written, and often the wrong letters appear on the paper. Of course I write them myself with my hand, but unintentionally and without being able to do anything about it. Sometimes it is enough to drive you crazy. Maybe it would be good if the little ones could come here again and do something about it. Since the last time they intervened here, things have really improved with the writing on the computer. But other things have happened since then, like putting the wrong words in the wrong places in what I am writing. But it often happens that texts simply disappear or move elsewhere, and so on. The same thing happens when I write. The same thing also happens when I put it on a flash drive to pass it on. Also otherwise very strange things happen, which are sometimes also seen or somehow perceived by other persons, like Daniela, for example, when she was working next to the road in the garden, heard and saw Mikhail driving by in his car, although he was still far away at the time in Bauma or Bretzwell or something, and only came about 20 minutes later, which Daniela of course saw again and heard the car driving. When Silvano and I drove down to the Womelsprung, the post bus was just coming out of the forest, so we drove aside and waited, because the bend is not suitable for the post bus and our put to cross. But the post bus did not come up the 40 meters or so towards us, and so did not pass next to us, which is why we looked, but the post bus had simply disappeared and vanished into thin air. Also 2 expensive books disappeared in the bookcase at my place, one about 4 or 5 years ago, but now also a second one about 6 months ago. I cannot buy another copy because they have been out of print for decades and are not reprinted. Recently I also lost a folder that was important for me because of taxes, and now again one that contained very important documents, and both have not turned up until today. All searches remained fruitless, but instead, out of the blue, something kept falling on my desk, such as old pieces of jewelry and so on. Also, money that had been counted several times disappeared without a trace from the deposit wallet, just as a 200-franc note disappeared before Patrick's and my eyes when we were doing his monthly accounts together. So it also happened with a bundle of 50 notes, 10 at a time, during the accounting work together with Pierce. It is also worth mentioning that I was always in the office when these large sums of money disappeared, even up to 1,000 sometimes there were also people with me such as Silvano, Patrick or Piers and so on who saw and witnessed themselves how the banknotes and so on simply disappeared without a trace from the tabletop and so on. Once Mikhail even saw how a piece of money suddenly materialized behind my left ear and then fell onto the table.
Even Ptaah himself witnessed such strange happenings in your workroom, as we could also see on our records how the one book of yours was stored in the bookcase and just suddenly disappeared.
Yes, I remember, because I was not allowed to go to the rack for a week when you installed your device there that recorded everything, so you could see how the book suddenly just disappeared without a trace. Strange things like that also happened to many persons who were suddenly groped or approached in a lewd manner, who then thought it was me, such as Simiase, Professor Bender, then above all Marcel, who fell off a chair and broke his ribs.
Yes, I am aware that because Simiase told me about it, she was after all the first person to be lewdly attacked and approached.
Yes, she was the first.
That's right, she told me everything, also that at first she thought you were the one lewdly addressing her and touching her, even though you were on the other side of your workspace and not in her circle. She was unfortunately startled and only realized after a while that it could not be you because you were not in her immediate vicinity.
It was still very embarrassing.
I am sure it was for everyone else too.
You can probably say that because, starting with Simiase, if I may name them again, then Hans Benz, Engelbert, even Professor Bender, then also Dr. Freud, Marcel, Silvano, and also the woman like Else, Olga, Maria Amata, Dorit, Bruni, Frogotsky, and Margaret, it was the same. At first they all thought that I was the guilty one, which is why they left and even took me to court. But then the time came, which took 3 years, when they apologized to me, and Jacobus even had to drive me to Galen to accept Amata's apology. Olgi came here to the center and apologized. Brune to Professor Bender, to Mrs. Gottschi telephoned and apologized in this way. Dorit also came here. Maria came together with Engelbert. Dr. Freud excused himself on the spot, Hans Benz too, and Silvano as well. Maybe there were some others who just kept quiet, but I do not know. But that was certainly the case, because they tried to sue me after about 30 years, and they did, but it was rejected because of statute of limitations. Probably an act of revenge by it was the decisive impetus for this, because I do not agree with him about Darwin and he hates me because of that.
This is well known to me, for I am well informed of all the evil that has been done against you in your native land since your boyhood, and later in many states of the earth, as well as all the lies and deceit that are commonplace around you today. I must say that this is more than a human being can bear and cope with, and it is puzzling to me how you were actually able to survive everything. It is really beyond my comprehension that you have not changed and remained the human being you need to be for your works, despite the assaulting and lying, the cheating as well as the maliciousness directed at you. This person who perpetrated this attack in Henwell on Billy, as mentioned above in Contact Report 797 as follows.
But one person, the one who almost hit me in Henwell, came to the center one day and apologized, saying that unfortunately he had been misled by the sect but had now freed himself from it and realized that a belief in a god and so on was nothing more than lying and so on in order to maintain a money-making dependency. Was a fanatical Jehovah's Witness, as you can read in the 264 Contact Report. I thought it was just one. The second attack was carried out by a fanatical Jehovah's Witness who tried to shoot me in Henwell through my office window. Another time the Gizeh twerps were involved in an attack when lightning struck me out of the blue, and so on. Once Jacobus Bertschinger and the brothers Hans and Konrad Schutzbach were there when a bullet hit me on the armor plate in front of my chest. Once Silvano Lemon stood next to me as a bullet hit the ground next to my feet. And also Wendell Stevens was once there when a shot was fired and the bullet hit only a few centimeters next to my head in the wall, and so on.
These 2 of the 5 devices the Umagos handed the woman appear to be some kind of electromagnetic microwave weapon and some kind of remote neural monitoring technology. Because electromagnetic weapons would explain how this group of 11 could influence various people to do anything to harm Billy, to attack his electronic devices, computers, televisions, kitchen appliances, and so on, and to negatively influence his work. And because Billy can neutralize these electromagnetic vibrations that are directed at him, they bounce off him, so to speak, and are deflected onto the equipment or materials he is working with. These negative influences on his electrical equipment then cause it to stop working properly. And why other people can use the same devices without any problems, maybe due to the fact that each person has a specific bioelectric field, and therefore each person reacts to a certain frequency, as even Bermuda mentions above in the 797 contact report that it is about electronic microwave weapons. Bermuda they also have many other efficacies, one of which is how they are used to attack your electronic devices and negatively affect your work and damage everything when you work with them. The emanations of the electronic microwaves also work in other ways, such as how you described to me the strange occurrence that happened in the kitchen of the central.
Except from the military-industrial complex, 2 electromagnetic weapons can be used to make individuals and large groups of people respond robotically to electromagnetic commands without relying on an implant. American science fiction author and research director at the United States Global Strategic Council Janet Morris traveled to Russia with colleagues in 1991 to study Russian technologies for commercial development. While there, she was invited to a demonstration of mind control technology. During one demonstration, an unknowing group of workers was irradiated outside on the grounds in front of the hospital. The researchers sent them an acoustic psychocorrection message through their machine, which instructed the workers to immediately put down their tools, knock on the door of the hospital, and ask if there was anything left for them to do. The workers behaved in exactly the same way. The machine transmits the acoustic psychocorrection message by means of infrasound ultra-low frequency electromagnetic waves through the bone conduction.
So earplugs cannot stop the message. The message passes the conscious level and is executed within under a minute after sonication.
In the early 1960s, biophysicist Dr. Olin Frey of Cornell University's General Electric Advanced Electronics Center made a discovery that became known as hearing by microwaves. He found that a person's auditory system was sensitive to certain electromagnetic frequencies, and when they were exposed to low-frequency electromagnetic waves, they heard buzzing and thumping sounds in their heads. Even deaf people could hear these sounds, proving that the brain is something like a powerful receiver. In 1973, Dr. Joseph Sharp conducted experiments with pulsed microwave audiograms. He had an isolation chamber locked and irradiated with these waves. After these experiments, Dr. Sharp heard voices in his head. After this discovery, Dr. Roberto Becker of the Advanced Research Project Agency ARPA, now called DARPA, said that these experiments could be useful for covert military operations, and that artificially generated voices in an enemy's head could drive him crazy. In addition, microwave-transmitted post-hypnotic commands could be used to trigger action by political assassins.
Further, it says in the contact report that a man of this 11er group, to an American friend, who belonged to the dark government respectively shadow governments, handed over one of these devices, and that this equipment had many possible applications, like for example to release hallucinations with humans, which seemed so genuine, that the concerning firm opinion was, it was reality which happened to them. This all sounds like some kind of remote neural monitoring technology, which is mentioned in my article The Military-Industrial Complex, Part 2, as follows.
Lensa can register a person's biomagnetic field and exploit it for surveillance purposes. The bioelectric field of a person can be monitored and influenced from a distance. The surges produced by the neurons are transmitted in an electroencephalogram and the signals are decoded. stimulation of brain waves has been researched since Project Ultra. This research was called radiation intelligence. Gizeh has developed technology as a result of bioelectronic warfare projects and has long since established the link from the brain to the computer. With this technology, it is also possible to create the symptoms of waves, artificial possession and muscle control. Each person generates a specific bioelectric field, and therefore each person responds to a specific frequency, and therefore a person standing next to a mind control victim does not perceive anything that is happening. REM users can pick up the electrical emissions generated in the visual cortex of the brain, amplify and decode them, and display them on a screen. So Gizeh sees what the person being monitored perceives without being connected to it by wires or electrodes. Those who doubt this statement should consider that in a pilot project in China, the brain waves of students were continuously monitored by means of an electronic device worn on the head to determine whether the students are in a good or bad mood, and whether they follow the lessons with interest. Any distraction is reported to the teacher and immediately forwarded to the parents via SMS. This is a technology that is available to the public, so to speak. What the elites of the military-industrial complex are not showing us is exactly this kind of REM technology. It is also possible for the REM operators to insert images into the brain of the person being monitored in order to create a virtual reality scenario.
UFO researcher Dr. Carla Turner investigated a case in which there were 3 witnesses to a virtual UFO abduction. 2 witnesses were awakened in their hostess' apartment by her screams. When they ran into the bedroom, they saw a bluish light completely enveloping the woman. Their friend Emily, a pseudonym, was in a trance state and seemed to be talking to someone. After a few minutes, the light went out, releasing her from a state of paralysis. Emilia told her friends that the event began after she heard a helicopter noise over the house. She felt as if she could see through the roof of her house. She claims that she saw the helicopter before it disappeared. Afterwards, she saw a reptilian and a small blue-black creature standing next to the bed. Her 2 guests, on the other hand, saw no other creatures in the room. For Emilia, however, this virtual reality scenario was completely real. Mind control researchers have several people among their victims who experienced such scenarios. The Lammers tell us in their book Covert Operations that a person named Ed Light always experiences a scenario when his consciousness is abruptly altered and he suddenly perceives a different environment. After that, he sometimes sees people, can perform actions and walk through virtual landscapes. During these scenarios, Ed and his fellow sufferers can no longer distinguish what is real and what is not. Possibly, the intelligence-controlled men in black received this device of the Omegos from the shadow government through this American friend.
219th contact Tuesday, 16th June 1987, 1:30 am.
Moreover, these renegades and men in black, as we also call them, and these have nothing to do with the so-called men in black who are of earthly origin, and thus, who are secret service-driven earth humans, strive to induce real visions and hallucinations through apparatus-driven suggestive impulses in earth humans who are susceptible to these. Their repertoire ranges from fake sightings and observations as well as alleged abductions up to simulated contacts and sexual intercourse with extraterrestrials, from which alleged pregnancies occur that, if they already appear, are caused quite normally with an earthly partner or by artificial manipulation of a medical nature or one's own nature.
This could also explain the mysterious circumstances that are mentioned as follows.
Also otherwise very strange things happen which are sometimes also seen or somehow perceived by other persons, like Daniela, for example, when she was working next to the road in the garden, heard and saw Mikhail driving by in his car, although he was still far away at the time in Bauma or Bretzwil or something, and only came about 20 minutes later, which Daniela of course saw again and heard the car driving. When Silverno and I drove down to the Womanly Sprung, the post bus was just coming out of the forest, so we drove aside and waited because the bend is not suitable for the post bus and output to cross. But the post bus did not come up the 40 meters or so towards us and so did not pass next to us, which is why we looked, but the post bus had simply disappeared and vanished into thin air.
As well.
Strange things like that also happened to many persons who were suddenly groped, remote neuronal technology, or approached in a lewd manner, microwave weapon, who then thought it was me, such as Simiase, Professor Bender, then above all Marcel, who fell off a chair and broke his ribs.
Yes, I am aware that because Simiase told me about it, she was after all the first person to be lewdly attacked and approached.
Yes, she was the first.
That's right, she told me everything, also that at first she thought you were the one lewdly addressing her and touching her, even though you were on the other side of your workspace and not in her circle. Remote neuronal technology. She was unfortunately startled and only realized after a while that it could not be you because you were not in her immediate vicinity.
Further, in the above-mentioned contact report, it is said that these energies influence Billy's health. For example, when he writes by hand, his handwriting is automatically distorted in such a way that he can no longer decipher it.
Of course I write them myself with my hand, but just unintentionally and without being able to do anything about it. Sometimes it is already so that one could go crazy thereby.
Which could be explained by the fact that when the output of these electromagnetic waves is coupled with the central nervous system, one gets effects similar to satanic possession. These effects are called remote motor control. RMC, as mentioned earlier. RMC can be used to artificially create heart attacks, simulate choking, and control the muscles responsible for speech by stimulating the muscles to create words that come out of the mouth even though the person does not want to speak. And why texts simply disappear, move elsewhere, or religious texts and writings suddenly appear on Billy's computer screen can also be explained with the following text from the article. Military-industrial complex. The NSA has built an electronic surveillance network that monitors the entire electromagnetic spectrum. This technology allows the NSA to record, monitor, and influence computers, telephones, radio and video equipment, printers, and so on, and even people's electrical field. The electromagnetic emissions from computers contain digital information. Specialists at the NSA can decode these emissions and therefore gain access to computer information without knowing the password or using traditional hacking techniques. It is also possible for them to use the reverse method to influence the emission from the outside and change the data or programs stored in the computer.
512th contact Saturday, 1st January 2011, 3:13 p.m.
Then I can talk openly. Thus Stephen Appenich explained again that on the earth, a religious sectarian organization works together with a certain secret service to manipulate the humans via the television, computers, and the internet as they wish. Not only are television equipment and many monitors manipulated so that the organization can see directly into the room and observe and listen to everything, where the respective device is located, but the computers are also manipulated at will. This alone in relation to computers means that they can be controlled and affected from outside if the organization involved desires to do so. This has been the case for many years, whereby you also have been affected by it with your computer, which was penetrated in order to disturb your work, such that with certain writings, articles and books that deal with religious and sectarian delusion, serious mistakes have been inserted or important facts deleted. Even pure computer disturbances are practiced with you, whereby even faults can occur. The whole thing, however, goes even further, because the mentioned secret service religious sectarian organization also intervenes in the lives of all users of televisions, monitors, and internet users and manipulates them. This organization, which is protected in a secret service manner using all the rules of the art, has achieved worldwide admittance by means of its countless number of manipulated devices into the consciousness of the people, and steers their behavior in many areas.
675th contact Wednesday, 8th March 2017, 2:45 p.m.
I know that birds of crows do this when they get used to people, and make friends with them, so to speak. But before I forget, I have to tell you from Gizeh and Yanara that your assumption regarding the strange and partly harmful incidents in the center and the disturbing and partly malignant changes in the scriptural works you write in the computer are based on religious liberal energies. These energies, they both explain, have a self-acting power and are very effectively directed towards hindering, distorting and rendering impossible your work, because all your work is directed against the falsehood of the unreality and falsehood of all religious and sectarian matters, and against this religious sectarian energy and its forces, which are able to penetrate our created protective shields. There is at present no possibility of defense, because they correspond to a nature which was unknown to us so far and which we have to fathom first. This means that the whole process of its exact analysis and a correspondingly effective defense can take years despite great, extensive and professional efforts and research, which Gizeh and Yanara will explain to you themselves in the near future. Unfortunately, nothing can be done from our side against all the annoying, unpleasant, and sometimes even damaging incidents that occur in the center and have been appearing to other center residents for quite some time.
664th contact Saturday, 19th November 2016, 2:57 p.m.
For now, your information will do. Then the next question: as you have known for a long time, there have been more and more unwanted things going on in my computer since some time ago, which emanate from large cult organizations and intelligence services, as you have explained. Gizeh has also said something about this, namely that the worldwide espionage network Echelon has its dirty fingers in it, which is a worldwide espionage network of the intelligence services of the United States of America, as well as Australia, Great Britain, Canada, and New Zealand.
That is correct, and through the system of this spy network, fax connections, countless internet data, and telephone conversations are registered, tapped, and evaluated by authorities, state offices and authorities, as well as by corporations, companies, the military, and all kinds of business sectors. Certain organizations, groups, and associations are also among those spied upon, such as the FIDU Association, as you know from Gizeh, who clarified this fact. The system is not only used to listen to conversations and record fax material, and so on, because the acquired data is forwarded via CLA to a separate computer center, where the secretly acquired data streams are evaluated fully automatically. The whole system serves not only the data collection, but also the monitoring of certain persons, companies, state and authority officials, military, corporations, companies and organizations, but also private persons, associations and groupings. And what you have mentioned regarding the strange occurrences in your computer, which occur again and again, since you have been working with it since 2001, that does not come from approximate, because they are deliberate external interventions, the origin and cause of which we unfortunately could not fathom yet. But now Gizeh, together with his colleague Yanara, who both
These devices of the Omegos, the electromagnetic energies arising from the religious faith tame, and with these devices collect, concentrate and strengthen, in order to direct them then bundled onto humans, can also, as it looks, apart from the technique as mentioned, also simply things disappear and in air dissolve, like also the Syrian men in black from locked rooms, objects, and so on, to steel coated, or like out of the blue, objects like pieces of jewelry, banknotes and so on, simply can materialize, as is mentioned in the contact reports. So I assume that this 11 group, respectively the descendants, still exist within the Jehovah's Witnesses sect, which from the beginning were connected with the Gizeh intelligences, and therefore also with the dark government of the United States of America. So you can say that the descendants of this 11th group and the shadow government of the United States of America, respectively the military-industrial complex, represent a direct connection and continuation of the Gizeh intelligences, which is not surprising if you look at the current world situation. Now it also makes sense why in the contact reports which are represented above, it is said that all 24 assassination attempts on the account of this 11 group goes those within the Witnesses Jehovah sect exist. Because it does not matter which different groups were behind the 24 assassinations of Billy as mentioned for example in the 264 account report.
264th contact Thursday, 14th May 1998, 12:55 am.
74 It's not just an attack. Because of the 15 attempted murders so far, 11 truthfully go back to the men in black.
I thought it was just one. The second attack was carried out by a fanatical Jehovah Witness who tried to shoot me in Hinwell through my office window. Another time the Gizeh twerps were involved in an attack when lightning struck me out of the blue, and so on. Once Jacobus Bertschinger and the brothers Hans and Konrad Schutzbach were there when a bullet hit me on the armor plate in front of my chest. Once Silver No Lemon stood next to me as a bullet hit the ground next to my feet. And also Wendell Stevens was once there when a shot was fired and the bullet hit only a few centimeters next to my head in the wall. For all the groupings ultimately belonged to the Gizeh intelligences, be it the Syrians, Pegasus refugees, 7 people, Ashtar Sharon and consorts, a Poison Gas Brothers, Brazilian group, and so on. They have been from the beginning and still are, so to speak, planting their ideas in the minds of the leaders of the world and let the soldiers attack on their orders. They are everywhere at the same time, coming quietly but with power, controlling people's thoughts while they are asleep in the waking state, changing people from the inside and making them different people, turning people into them, and the best part is that while it is happening they don't even realize it. So the saying that the third Reich has been resurrected in America takes on a whole new meaning.
The Religious Sectarian Artificial Intelligence 517th contact Thursday, 16th January 2014, 3:03 p.m.
Consciousness also develops its own energy which is mobilized by the human being's thoughts and feelings. Depending on the thoughts and feelings, the corresponding energies are formed in consciousness and become active. If there are millions and billions of human beings who control their thoughts and feelings in the same way, for example in relation to a religious sectarian belief, then these thought energies accumulate and deposit themselves wherever religious sectarian practices are cultivated, such as in churches, temples, monasteries, chapels, mosques and synagogues and so on. Especially in such places the energies of faith accumulate and have a very strong effect on all the human beings who visit these places, whereby the deposited vibrations make them more and more dependent on the religious sectarian delusion of faith without those affected noticing. Human beings, however, who resist all religious sectarianism and against the delusional belief in God and against the vibrations and impulses of this belief energy, are attacked by this tremendously strong delusional belief power and are threatened under certain circumstances of life, as has happened to me several times in my life. For example, when I had to be carried out of the Incident monastery and brought back to the center because of this. Something with the same energies and forces also happened in the center on 20th August 1982. See Volume 4, Pleiadian Pleiarans Contact Reports, Contact No. 114, pages 443 to 444. but with the Gizeh intelligences and their allies at work, but with religious sectarian energies being concentrated and used, which even manifested visibly as you players also proved. But besides these events, there were others in the same context several times also in Moscow's churches and chapels and in a monastery near Corinthos in Greece. So I have had quite bad experiences with the religious sectarian energies, vibrations and their impulses in my life, and have had experiences from them which were quite life-threatening. This is actually the most important thing I can explain.
You forget, however, that with regard to these malign and negative energies and vibrations of religious and sectarian form, it also happens in the same way that the human beings in general are affected by it when they deal with religious sectarian writings, utensils, or thoughts. The corresponding oscillations cause that slowly but surely good and order-preserving attitudes and actions, as well as the sense of reality and truth, and so on, which have been created slowly but surely and are recognized as correct and followed, are affected by these degenerated energy oscillations. Subsequently, valuable orders and rules are also objected to and abandoned, which were thought up in a valuable way in existence and in life, and which organized and charged everything into the correct forms. This means that the human beings slowly but surely begin to doubt their good decisions, guidelines, and behavior once they have been made, and slowly but surely begin to doubt their correctness, and to detach themselves from them in order to unconsciously drift more and more into the spell of the negative vibrations and impulses of religious sectarianism. Those affected by the energetic vibrations in this way lose the relationship to their own values and ideas with regard to recognized or self-created good and positive behaviors which have been built up in reason and responsibility, and which have been recognized and followed as correct. This is a fact which is, however, not noticed by the affected persons and is therefore also denied when trying to explain it to them. And this happens very quickly and also continues for years when the preoccupation with religious and sectarian matters is abandoned, such as working through religious sectarian writings or dealing with similar cultic utensils or with the delusion itself. The only way to counteract this is by reorienting oneself towards a healthy and rational attitude and knowledge, also towards good, positive and valuable behavior that is in harmony with reality and its truth. If this is not done in a conscious and controlled way, then drifting away and distancing oneself from the effective reality and truth is ultimately the malignant conclusion of the whole. As a consequence, the human being then lives there in a dichotomy, which on the one hand causes him to behave badly and on the other hand leads him to segregation and to arrogance and dishonesty towards his fellow human beings, which inevitably affects the correct way of life as well as the evolution of consciousness. But the whole of religious sectarian energy, its vibrations and impulses have been building up on earth for a very long time, which has led to political and sectarian fanatic religious wars in various parts of the world, as well as to terrorism and millions of deaths. Earthly world history is full of such atrocities, for even in ancient times, the religious sectarian belief in God has developed into a very dangerous power and has made itself a global factor spread by the atmosphere, with the whole of this power working its way up to a new peak in the present and future. Thus it is inevitable that all those human beings who are negatively influenced and affected in their thoughts and feelings, in their minds and reason, and in their actions and behavior by the religious sectarian energies and their vibrations and impulses, will inevitably go against their own minds and their own reason. And this happens without those affected noticing, and without the confused assumption that they would decide everything for their own and others' benefit. But this is an evil fallacy, precisely because everything happens unconsciously and is not perceived consciously. Thus the human beings are captivated by the religious sectarian energy and its vibrations, which have been spreading around the world for a long time, and which have developed into an enormous power. People who are particularly unstable in their delusions of faith, as well as many people who falsely believe themselves to be independent of religious sectarianism, usually do not control their thoughts and feelings, only weakly or inadequately, because their delusions or self-deception make them think they are better than their fellow human beings, and as a result they are particularly weak in the face of religious sectarian energies, vibrations, and impulses, and are therefore very strongly attacked. So they either fall into a religious, sectarian belief in God or into a personal belief which has nothing to do with reality and its truth. By doing so, however, the human beings deceive themselves and become subject to the erroneous assumption that they would act correctly in their wrong behavior. Further on, however, these energies, vibrations and impulses, which originate from religious sectarian beliefs, and have long since become independent, cause the human beings affected by them to question all that is good and regulate, that has proven itself, and to act accordingly wrongly. In addition, it is not uncommon for people to thirst for revenge and retribution for all sorts of things, freely according to the sectarian principle an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But this is the source of hatred and jealousy, terrorism and war, and all kinds of other evil, because the sectarian religious delusion and its energies and vibrations are in fact a very evil that has spread all over the earth, and is taking its toll. And especially in the present day, it is happening with increasing vehemence, and to a great extent that all religions and their sects are making very, very great efforts to ensure that the faithful do not continue to run away from them, as is the case in the New Age, because the human beings are trying more and more to free themselves from the religious sectarian yoke. Subsequently, a large-scale missionary work is being carried out, especially among children and young people, in order to find new believers in God, and to bind them to religions and sects. It is unavoidable that the old and medieval people are also not left out of the missionary efforts. The new religious sectarian efforts in this regard make the matter of vibrations much worse than it used to be. With each new delusional believer, the religious sectarian energy and power grows. And when you consider that today more than 6 billion, indeed almost 7 billion delusional believers in God have become addicted to religions and sects, then it is no longer surprising that the malignant energy of faith with its vibrations is a tremendously malignant power, which among many other things also ensures that the overpopulation is growing ever faster. In this respect, there is indeed a deep connection between the religious sectarian energies, vibrations, and forms of belief, and the uncontrolled increase in overpopulation, which is hardly or not at all understood by many Earth humans, and is even assumed to be impossible. This connection consists in the fact that the energy vibrations of religion and sects influence the human beings very strongly to produce offspring, because this is a factor of religious and sectarian heresies. Furthermore, these aggressive energies and vibrations are directed against all that is good and positive, because the heresies are consistently directed towards hatred, revenge, punishment, and retribution in the opposite direction to that in which peace and love are demanded. This contradiction, however, leads to the fact that the strongest always comes to the fore, and thus the evil, the bad, and the thoroughly negative. Really, the fact that it is much easier and also more self-satisfying for the human being to become abusive, angry, and rageful, and to cry out for punishment, revenge, and retribution than to turn to love, peace, freedom, and harmony in a controlled way, and to cultivate and cherish these most important forms of behavior.
517th contact Thursday, 16th January 2014, 3:03 p.m.
Oh, and what is general about the human beings, since they are also affected by such vibrations?
That is a completely different matter, was explained to Asket when she asked about it. The human beings can still be hit by those vibrations that are transmitted through the atmosphere, But it is in the interest of every single human being to consciously control these vibrations and not to let them become effective in their own world of consciousness, thoughts, feelings and psychology, and in their actions and behavior.
But the vibrations are very aggressive and powerful, and as you said, they can cause a lot of damage and even disaster, also in the form of discord, through quarreling, jealousy, hatred, disharmony, enmity, criminality, crime, and all other forms of violence, up to war, murder, and terrorism, and so on. One can see and hear what is happening in this way in the world outside, and that it is getting worse and worse in this respect.
This is correct, because the vibrational impulses lead to thoughtless and unrestrained thoughts and feelings, which then cause the very unpleasant degenerating effects. And as many Earth humans tend to overestimate themselves, to be arrogant and uncontrolled, the effects can be accordingly malicious, negative, and unjust, often only as a result of trivialities, because the human beings do not control themselves, and therefore are not able to control themselves, but usually only because they do not make the effort to do so. And they do this despite the fact that they know that their aggressive reactions are wrong and disharmonious, and that this leads to quarreling and discord. So in this relationship they act against their better knowledge, which is especially true in the interpersonal sphere, and consequently uncontrolled, unthoughtful attacks and malice break out and cause a lot of harm in terms of behavior. However, if the human being consciously and willingly fights back, he is able to avert evil. Unfortunately, however, it is the case that the human beings who are overconfident, uncontrolled, and arrogant, and so on, do not realize that certain of their such and other impulses are especially strongly induced by the power of such vibrational impulses. And since they do not think about their wrong behavior in this respect, they assume that their actions and their attitude and mood and so on are correct. As a result, they also never consider that they are behaving wrongly, but they invent a guilt for some things and actions and shift it onto those fellow human beings with whom they are dealing at the moment. It must also be taken into account that the uncontrolled growth of overpopulation is leading to more and more people falling into religious sectarian delusion, which in turn increases the malicious aggressive vibrations that affect especially those human beings who overestimate themselves and who are arrogant and unrestrained.
These religious and sectarian vibrations are also evil in themselves. But until the human beings of Earth understand this, a catastrophe must also befall mankind in this respect.
681st Contact Wednesday, 17th May 2017, 6:04 p.m.
We were finally able to analyze these unknown energies and swinging waves and their forces, and in doings so we were also able to ascertain that it is mainly a matter of 5 different types of energy and swinging waves of different strengths, whereby the 2 strongest ones can penetrate the 3 protective shields uninhibitedly and trigger the disturbing and harmful phenomena, which are very detrimental and dangerous and also cause unrest and discord. And these energies and their swinging waves are brought about by the forces of consciousness, and thus by the forces of thought of the great mass of Earth humans, who are addicted to thoughts and feelings of religious faith, and who, in this way, unconsciously and thus without their knowledge, attack through their forces of consciousness everything that is not compatible with their delusion of religious faith. In this way, all unpleasantness in the center is triggered precisely by the religious believers caught in religious streams of consciousness and thoughts, or by their forces of consciousness. Seifanat, your voice sounds troubled, my friend. But what you say is an indisputable fact, as I know from all the information available to me in this regard. And before you ask, the various energies and their swinging waves and forces are 5 different forms which are also of different strengths, about which I will give you further explanations later. 702nd Contact Sunday, 4th February 2018, 12:41 p.m.
I think so too, and we could do without such because it always creates like, oh, again, and I thought it ended with the number 13. But you are scared and now you are making a face like a big question mark. You should not be frightened because on the one hand I do not think there is any danger in that, and on the other hand you get used to it.
That is strange and really frightened me. Ptaah had told us about his experience, but we could not imagine what was explained. And the fact that I myself saw and experienced how something suddenly materialized in front of your face and fell onto the work table, that really startled me. What is that and how does something materialize in that way?
Unfortunately, I also do not know, therefore I cannot explain it either. Ptaah also witnessed such an incident on the 1st of February when these jewels fell on the table in front of me. He was as perplexed and a big question mark as you are now, Florina. But look here, all these coins and these rings have materialized and fallen on the table in front of my face in the last 3 months. And this little cloth rose that also suddenly materialized out of nowhere next to my son Atlantis some time ago and fell next to him on the sofa. And the one that materialized now and is lying here in front of me is a money note worth 200 francs.
I do not understand. Why is this happening to you?
Really, Florina, I do not know, and I do not have an explanation for it either, just as I do not have an explanation for all the other strange occurrences that have been happening again and again for years, which also affect the functions of my computer and thus my work. For some time now, such strange effects have also been occurring with Bernadette, as a result of which she too has been unpleasantly harmed in relation to her computer work.
578th contact Thursday, 9th January 2014, 10:48 p.m.
Which will probably be correct, because your concerns do indeed have their reasons. So now listen to what we were able to fathom. The whole thing is about religious, sectarian fanatical energies, which are emitted in billions of times the number of human beings affected by delusions of godliness, and which accumulate. In this way they become a huge power, which accumulates worldwide in carriers of electricity and causes such phenomena as you have described to me repeatedly. The origins are the sectarian religious thoughts that send out electromagnetic impulses that are inserted into the carriers of electricity, especially into the generators, transformers and distribution stations of the power stations, from where they spread through the electrical carriers and produce their strange and manifold effects wherever anti-religious and anti-sectarian efforts appear. In this way, the energies in question become independent, and become a power that acts independently in the sense of the believers who are afflicted by the delusion of faith, in the way you have described it several times in the past. In the same way, this powerful energy also has a direct effect on all the human beings who are unstable in faith, billions of times over, so that they are so influenced by religion and sectarianism that they are unable to free themselves from their delusions of faith, while other unstable believers fall into delusion and become unrealistic and untruthful. This also results in religious sectarian terrorism, as was the case, for example, with the Christian Crusaders and witch delusionists, as well as with Islam and the Kali sect in India and various other religious sects, but is also the case today with Islamist and political terrorism and so on. Religious sectarianism wields tremendous power and leads the human beings to seek revenge and retaliation in the name of their faith, as well as to commit delusional murders and mass murders of many kinds, proving that a religious sectarian faith is absolutely not harmless. It is also a fact that many death penalty claims are attributed to religious and sectarian believers, with many of them invoking the false and inhumane principle of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, which is contrary to natural creative laws and commandments. The power of the religious sectarian thought vibrations, which are electromagnetic in nature, are thus combined with the vibrations of electricity, which are the actual factor of carrying and spreading. And since all possible and impossible things worldwide are based on electrification, this is the best medium to spread and allow the dangerous religious and sectarian vibrations to work everywhere. And finally, there are also the mobile phones, which you call handy, through which the vibrations are transmitted directly into the human beings. This enables the religious, sectarian, offensive vibration to manifest itself in the consciousness, causing much behavioral harm to unstable human beings, because they cannot control the accompanying aggressiveness, but rather implement it thoughtlessly through correspondingly evil actions and deeds, which can lead to anarchism and the harassment, bullying, beating, and even the killing and effective murder of fellow human beings. And in order to ward off all these evil and negative effects, there are unfortunately no countermeasures that could be taken, because it should be possible to block every single degenerated thought impulse of the religious or sectarian delusional believers. This is impossible, however, because the number of religious or sectarian delusional believers is estimated at more than 6 billion.
So, every single person of the 6 billion or more would have to be well. From what you say, the whole thing has been in evidence since earlier times, because you said that the Christian crusaders and the witch illusionists and so on were also influenced by the religious sectarian vibrations, but less so than today. Furthermore, I notice that you use more and more of my ways of speaking, terms and words.
That is correct. I mean, on the one hand, in terms of the use of your ways of speaking, terms, and words, because they say much more in their power than the simple forms that have diplomatic features. So I have made it a habit to use your many expressive ways of speaking, terms, and words. On the other hand, it is also correct that even in earlier times everything was on a smaller scale in terms of impact, because there were fewer human beings, whereas today, there are several billions, and also the electricity, which is a perfect carrier, encompasses the whole world and uncontrollably amplifies and spreads the aggressive vibrations. Unfortunately, it is impossible to counteract all this in any technical way, even for us, but also for the Sunner, who do not have any technology that would make this possible. The only thing that could be effective would be the final dissolution of all religious sectarian beliefs, in connection with the teaching and learning of the effective reality and its truth, to which Earth humans would have to turn through understanding and reason. There is no other possibility, and if this is not considered and implemented, then everything will become even worse, also in relation to the growing overpopulation. Because large parts of the delusional believers believe that religious sectarian heresies are right to unlimited procreation, through which in turn new delusional believers are bred.
Translation: the more religious a person is, the more he believes. The more he believes, the less he thinks. The less he thinks, the dumber he is. The dumber he is, the easier he can be controlled. Guest article by Berk, a blog member who joins us from Germany.